We appreciate all of the guests who have appeared on our show and sincerely thank them for providing you, our audience, with useful information. However, the advice our guests provide is theirs, and we encourage you to seek out a professional if you have specific questions about any topic we cover on the Crushing Debt Podcast. On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast, Money Grief.
Welcome to the Crushing Debt Podcast with your host, Florida attorney Shawn Yesner, where our goal is to help you get rid of the financial bullies in your life.
So welcome back to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Shawn Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law, and I am happy to have back with me in studio your financial coach, George Corbello. Welcome, George.
Shawn, how are you? How's it going?
I am surrounded by financial coaches today.
You're in trouble. Usually it's the other way around. I'm surrounded by lawyers, so I'm the this feels a lot better in this episode.
Yeah, George is getting payback on me this week. So we do have a guest on this week's show. I'm going to get to his introduction in one quick second. Before I do that, I want to talk to you about one of our sponsors, who I've mentioned many times before on the show, Sam Cohen. He owns Attorneys First Insurance. They write errors and omissions insurance, malpractice coverage, basically, to attorneys and title companies all over the country. So if you know an attorney or title company that wants to get a quote on malpractice coverage, definitely send them Sam's way. You can reach him, Sam, at attorneysfirst.com, or that's also the website, attorneysfirst.com. But I am excited to get to our guest this week. He is a personal finance coach and content writer for the Clark on Money blog. He likes to take the stress out of people's personal finances, help them stop living paycheck to paycheck, plan for their future, and achieve their life goals. His dad enjoyed serving as a small business entrepreneur. His mom had a deep passion for her work as an elementary educator. They both were excited about helping families and individuals improve their quality of life. Their innate gifts inspired our guest to reach out and help others with the same passion and love, just as they did. It is his desire to combine passion, compassion, empathy, teaching, business, and personal finance to ultimately transform the lives of those people that he works with. He has a degree in psychology and completed studies at the College for Financial Planning. In addition to financial coaching and blogging, his favorite activities: genealogy, music, sports, travel, walking, spending time with his wife and his other family members. I am happy to have a guest on our show this week, Mr. Bobby Clark. Welcome, Bobby.
Thank you so much, Shawn, for that great introduction. I was wondering, I said, wow, somebody really took some time out to look into the things that I do and who I
Shawn's
really
professional.
I do a little bit of prep work before these shows, yeah, from time to time.
I see you did a lot of prep work.
So,
also, hello, George. Good to see you.
Yeah, see, again, I'm not the professional, so we're good. We've already established that in the episode.
I do want to give out real quick before we get started. So your website is clarkonmoney.com. That's where your blog is located. And then if people want to reach you by email, it's bobby@clarkonmoney.com. And again, I'll put both of those in the notes here in the episode. So if people want to check out your website or contact you, they can. But I am surrounded by financial coaches
You'll
today.
be fine. You're going to learn something today. That's what I'm
Okay.
thinking. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, I'm gonna turn it over to George then, since this is
So we talk about money, and obviously having more of it as part of this journey and part of the things that we're doing in this podcast, right? We've had some really good episodes lately. I think, Shawn, we're on a roll here. This is a good thing.
Yeah, don't screw it up.
I won't screw it up. So for this episode, I think, Bobby, I think we brought you on board. We wanted to hear more about, we always talk about prep, the things that we need to do to have that foundation when it comes to money. But what happens when life kind of, kicks you a little bit? When something happens, you have loss. It's inevitable for all of us. Just trying to understand exactly what are some of the things that we, need to kind of look out for, because there's probably signs, when we talk about loss. Loss is not just job or abilities, disabilities that may happen, but it's also, loss of like family members, and things that we deal with in those situations. So that's kind of the focus that we're, I guess we want to do there. But again, get your expertise in this subject and really want to learn more about it.
Yeah, Shawn, that's a great segue into the conversation for today. And loss, grief, those things are very tough. It deals deeper than a lot of us really think it does, and it can last a very long time. We're accustomed to thinking about grief as something of losing a loved one or a loved one dying. But you also mentioned that it can be other than that, which you can feel just as painful or just as devastating when we experience that. And as you know, it's like if you live long enough, you're going to do it. You're going to experience it. And we have to just deal with that. And money grief is powerful, it's subtle, and it's complex. It can make people feel more alone than at any other time in their lives. And given the isolation, the intensity, and the unfamiliar experience is the reason why so many of us struggle with managing our money during these stressful times.
What are some things, I mean, certainly there are some events that cause loss, like illness or death or something like that. But if there's a situation where you can see it coming, so for example, somebody who is they've made the decision that they want to get a divorce, for example.
Right.
What are some things that you could suggest that for someone who's decided, okay, it's time to get the divorce, or I've just been served with the divorce, and I know that I'm either going to be faced with paying alimony or child support, or will my ex-spouse, when it comes to that point, pay me alimony or child support? If you can see it coming, what are some things you can do to prepare for it?
You know, when you can see it coming, Shawn, you think you're prepared for it, you think you're ready for it, and when it actually arrives, you feel like your world is turned upside down. You're still devastated. You can see it coming. You brace for it. One of the things that I always tell people to do, and because of the fact that the feeling can be so devastating, even though you're ready for it. One of the things that I do and tell people to do, first of all, because there is no cure for the feeling that you're going to get, is to just acknowledge prayer. Mm-hmm. You got to start somewhere, and starting with a higher power is what I would recommend people do if they're of that type of spiritual person. But if, you know, with that, the next thing you want to do is feel the emotions that come along with that. Go ahead. I mean, if it's you may get angry, you may get disappointed, you may be fearful, but you have to feel that and go through that. And once you feel that and go through that, the next thing you want to do is gather yourself. And one way of gathering yourself is re-evaluating your values, where you are, who you are. And that's going to set the foundation for handling your money. Because your money, the world keeps going. Your world may have been shattered, may have stopped, you feel that way, but the environment continues to go on. And one of the immediate things, or the short-term thing you can do in terms of finances is begin to track your spending. Know what's coming in, know what's going out, create or update your budget. For some people, they may be in a situation where this is their first time that they've ever had to make money decisions.
Right.
Yeah, I was thinking you might want to create a budget.
I go back to the time where I was preparing taxes on a volunteer basis, and a lady came in to get her taxes done. Her husband had passed, and I asked her, well, when did he pass? And she told me, well, I can't remember. I said, did he pass this tax season or was it last tax season? Huh. I can't remember when he passed. So the devastation can be just that deep. The trauma's still there,
right?
It can be just that deep. So you're going to have immediate things to do, tracking your spending, your monthly spending, your debt, creating a budget, setting up your bank accounts, maybe changing the beneficiaries and things like that are some of the things that immediately has to be done when you're faced with a loss, a human loss, or even the property or some other kind of loss.
Yeah, I've noticed that in those kind of times as well. Imagine putting yourself in that situation where you have this loss, and then all of a sudden it's kind of worrying, like how we're going to pay for the rent or how we're going to, pay for mortgage, dealing with those kind of things. So for me as well, it's kind of having that support system around you to be able to provide that. If that's trusted family member or a relative who can help with some of those kind of situations, especially if you're the one who's directly impacted. I've seen a lot of times. The other things that, and again, we are dealing with it now after the fact, right? So before the loss, I mean, we're all in that mode of like, divorce is never going to happen, right? Or death is never going to happen to us.
Until it does.
Right. So, Bobby, are there any things before for those kind of events, even though, like you said, we don't anticipate them coming, but even if we knew they're coming, is there things in our budget? Is there things that in how we're handling money that we should be planning for those kind of events, or just in case, as much as I'd like to say, in those kind of situations?
Sure. There's some things that you can do. And one of the biggest things that I think that a person can do is have open communication with your partner. Know what's going on financially. Have those discussions about where the money is, where is it going, when does it come in. Prepare things like healthcare documents, prepare wills, things like that you can do in case or when things happen. Because if you don't know where the money is, or your partner or spouse is handling all the finances, and suddenly they are not there anymore, you're going to be at a loss. So the best way to do it, and that's one of the hardest things for people to do, is talk about those things before they occur, or the planning before, the what if. We don't like to talk about what if bad things happen. We always focus on the good things, but having that conversation and working together as spouses will go a long, long way in helping you get through any kind of grief or loss if that person is suddenly taken away from you.
Yeah, I mean, we all think we're going to live forever.
Well, I think I am, but that's just me.
Well, in this podcast,
in this podcast, forever.
In these
recordings,
exactly. You will.
I hear you.
I think I've told this before. My wife's grandfather, when he knew that he was sick and it probably was not going to be something he was going to recover from, I remember he created something that he literally called it the Doomsday Book.
Oh, wow.
For when he was gone. But it had everything in it. It had the will. It had all the powers of attorney. It had all the healthcare surrogates. It had where are all the bank accounts? What are all the bank account numbers? What are all the passwords? What are all the websites? It literally had everything in it, so that when he passed, my wife's grandmother literally could take that book to the probate attorney and say, here it is. And some of the stuff in there said, this will pass without probate. This, you might need a probate. And, even going through my estate plan, 6, 7, 8 months ago, it was hard to do because you don't want to think about, where do my kids go if something happens to me? But there was some comfort level to knowing that we had all that answered and we had all that planned.
That's great, Shawn. That's a great example of how important it is, and how thinking forward and also looking out for the ones who's going to be left behind,
survivors,
to take care of matters, and just being thoughtful and being mindful about those people, and not wanting them to have to struggle or suffer as less as they can, just because you was being thoughtful enough to work these things out beforehand. But it happens, as you know, the opposite most time, where this stuff is not done, and we end up with a lot of extra stress and things like that. And organizing your financial records, or legal documents, or contacts, contracts, and things like that are so important.
Yeah.
One of the things that people could do is set up filing systems where you can have active documents, you can have archived documents, or you may have deeds or things like that you don't use every day or rely on every day. Those things can be separated in a file. You can just organize things in a way that, so when you're not there, or that person is not there, you can go right to it without having to look for days or weeks or whatever to try to find it, or try to get copies from the government agency or something like that.
The thing that I've noticed too in those kind of situations is like the access to the accounts. Like beforehand, make sure if it's you and your spouse, any accounts, it's easier if they're, both spouses are on the account than having to, not have one or the other in regards to that. Because getting access to those things after the fact is just a grueling process. So again, harder to do when you're grieving. And that's the one thing we want to kind of be prepared for a lot of that stuff. And I love the fact that listing it out, having the account information, the websites, just make it easy for folks to deal with. I love that. Let me go on this one then. Open discussion about your finances prior. We've seen so many spouses, again, as coaches, and probably as a lawyer, my friend, you've probably seen it too. Yeah. People spouses, it's like, oh, my husband or my wife, they do all the finances and I just live. I only deal with those kind of situations. In case of death or something of that nature, you then put yourself in that one person now is, I've never done a budget before. How do we have that conversation beforehand to kind of like, it's good to know what, how we're spending our money, where the accounts are, that kind of stuff beforehand? Because I'd imagine when you're in grief and now all of a sudden you need to know how to do those things, it makes it even more hard. So what are we talking about? How do we bring that conversation up beforehand? Because it's like, oh, I don't want to know about it. It's, those are the bills. I'll let my significant other deal with all that.
Well, the thing about that, and I was talking to one of my friends about how we set ourselves up for that kind of behavior where we, especially the males in the family, tend to handle the finances a lot more than the women do. And a lot of that comes from even before marriage, we take our dates out to lunch or to dinner. We always take care of the bill. We foot the bill.
Mm-hmm.
And I
don't know about dating today. That might be a little different, but
it's
but
a little bit different, but there's still a lot of it goes on. And you're just given the idea of, I'm going to take care of the finances.
Right.
Don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of the finances.
I'm in control.
And I'm in control. I got this. Don't worry about it. Just have a great time. And that can backfire on you over time, because that spouse may assume just you're going to do everything for me. But you have to be willing to open up and allow your spouse to come in and have the conversation. Right. Even if they don't want to have the conversation, you've got to invite them to come in and say, hey, this is where the money is. This is what's coming in. This is what's going out. This is who we owe. This is the debt. This is our expenses. So that conversation has to be initiated by that partner who is in charge of the money, but also that partner who's not have the responsibility to want to learn how to manage the money. And with that kind of attitude, it's easier to have the conversation.
I got to say that, and that's the hard part is having those conversations early on really allows us to be able to just be better prepared. I'm in the boat of couples need to know everything. They need to understand how things are happening. Whether somebody's in charge or anything, that's one thing, but still being aware. That mentality of like set it and forget it kind of thing, we have to kind of eliminate that as part of this new openness and discussion that we're trying to have too.
Right. For some families, it may be helpful for them to have a money session talk every so often. Put it on the calendar, right, or just agree to at some point in time during the month just to sit down and go over their finances together.
Yeah,
so they can ask those questions and find out what's going on and share their thoughts and their plans about the future. A lot of, as you know, conversation open up a lot of doors. So having that conversation at a certain time of the calendar month or day of the week or whatever is a great way to keep both partners engaged in the financial aspects of their marriage.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking that's we've fallen into that habit of I take care of all the bills at my house. And so maybe sitting with my wife when I do the bills one month and saying, here's why I pay this one this amount, and here's where this bill is, and here's where these bill pay tabs are, and all that other kind of stuff.
Yeah. A lot of people in their family, just by maybe their mindset or the way they was raised in their household, they don't want anything to do with the money.
Right.
They might have been in a household where one parent did it all, and that's in their subconscious. So, trying to change that could be a challenge for someone. Even if you want to open up and say, "Hey, come sit down with me and watch how we do the money," that mindset for them may be, "Well, I don't, just go ahead. I don't want any part of it." So, it's a lot of things that can go into making that happen, where you can sit down and discuss finances.
Yeah, it's not going to happen on the first try. That's for sure. You got to try a few times. Maybe it not be successful the first few times, but the consistency around the conversation will definitely help in creating a new habit, creating a new behavior. Shawn, let me work on you then, because you're the lawyer guy here, because we're all touchy feely right now on this subject. But from a lawyer's standpoint, wills, we talked about wills and insurance, probate, you have mentioned those. Like, what are some of the things to keep in mind prior to like a loss of event, a grieving, situation, and then afterwards? So let's do before and after. That's what we're trying to figure out there.
So I think for me, and we probably should have an estate planning probate attorney on the show to answer some of these questions, but for me, it's making sure you've got all your documents in order. So do I have a will? Do I have the healthcare surrogate forms? If something happens to me, who is going to be in charge of deciding when it's time to pull the plug or if it's time to pull the plug? Having those kinds of documents. But even beyond that, talking to either Bobby or talking to you or talking to an estate planning attorney or something about what can we do to avoid probate? Because probate costs money, and there are things you can do to avoid probate, ways you can structure the bank accounts so that if something happens to me, my wife just inherits the bank account. If something happens to me, she just inherits the stock accounts. Right. So putting those things in place maybe to even avoid probate entirely, although the other thing you really got to be careful of is moving states. So probate law is very state specific. And so if I live in Florida and I have my estate plan in Florida, but then I move to Arizona, what do Arizona's laws say about probate? And will the Florida probate documents translate to an Arizona court, or do I need to see an Arizona attorney and get them changed? Those are the things that would be on my mind.
Got it. So if you moving definitely initiates those conversations. Any type of change like that, you want to see what the state laws would be, and just maybe have a conversation when those kind of changes. That's a great idea.
An estate plan you put together in New York, New Jersey,
it's gonna be different.
May not work in Florida.
Makes sense.
One of my other questions is: should you be planning? And maybe this is for both of you, George and Bobby. I love my wife, and I could never imagine a situation where we would get divorced. But honestly, a lot of people that get divorced can't ever imagine a situation. So what would you all say to the person that walks in and says, I love my wife, I don't plan on getting divorced, but should I have a contingency plan just in case my wife walks in one day and says, I don't want to be married anymore? Or is that just kind of setting it in your mind to become reality?
Bobby, I'll let you take it first.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I've got a wife myself, so
exactly. There you go. Never plan ahead.
No, but on a serious note, when you go down the road of what ifs, you have to consider that. Now, having that conversation with your spouse can be something that can be very challenging, and you may hesitate or think about it or whatever. But at some point in a marriage, you have to be transparent. You just have to, if the marriage is going to survive, you have to be transparent. And when you become transparent, these type of questions or discussions will come out. And based on how that discussion goes is what I think would be the best thing for that person to do.
Yeah. I would look at it as if the thought process is like we're both unhappy and we're trying to figure out where we are. Money is probably one subject that's happening, but there's other subjects. So again, counseling, therapy is some of the things that will probably come up. If you're further down the road and it's like, I think we've done what we can, protections around that is something, just know, again, access to the account, what money, what's the assets. There's so many the conversations that I would imagine would have to happen. And then, of course, and that's, I'm assuming, before we get a lawyer, right? That we maybe to divide and conquer and see how that goes. But a lot of times, let me just say, if I'm the person who's never looked at the finances and absolutely does not know anything, I'm learning more about that information, where the accounts, how much do we have, how are we making money, what bills are we paying, that kind of stuff. So if you're in the boat of unknown, you have to learn a little bit more about your situation. Then you can figure out, it's not like, I'm now going to have a secret account and I'm going to start stashing $3,000 a month into this account. We don't want you to be put in a position where you're not transparent. I'm in the same boat, Bobby. Be transparent. Like, hey, if we're going down this road, I need to start putting some things aside for this situation. May not go over well as part of it, I would imagine. But I'm going to assume that money is just one of many topics that is probably plaguing that couple in that situation. But more knowledge and start to be prepared of how and what next steps need to happen, I believe is the important steps is if you're going down that road. But no one plans to get the divorce, but what is it, like 53% of couples end up in divorce? It's pretty high.
It's pretty high.
It's pretty high. So, with that, you just have to be in a planning mode. You're in a what if mode, but you have to plan for that situation, or at least have some idea of what you want to do in that situation.
Yeah, the only other caveat that I would say too, we talked about wills and all of those kind of things. Protecting our money, I would imagine, also includes the insurance, term insurance, having certain things in place. That's the other thing. As much as I'd like to say I'm going to live forever, if I'm the breadwinner in my house, if I'm not there and my wife's not able to handle the expenses, I want to have insurance that's in place that protects my family and the income as I'm not here, but they at least now are taken care of.
I've told that cautionary tale before as well. I have a good friends of mine that I met when I was working as an attorney in Miami. They eventually moved up here to the Tampa Bay area. They have 3 kids. The husband, who was a few years younger than me, passed away when we were in our 30s, and he left his wife and 3 minor kids and a $10,000 life insurance policy.
Wow.
I had to work with her to modify the mortgage, and the other problem that they had there was it was one of these situations where he had an okay job, and so it was his credit that qualified them for the mortgage, and so she wasn't on the note. And so when I tried to modify the mortgage, they wanted to know, well, you need to file a probate so that the wife can speak for it was a big mess. And so, especially at 30, even then it's the cautionary tale of you need to be talking. You need to talk about this stuff with your significant other, because you never know when, you're going to step off the curb and the proverbial bus is going to mow you down.
Exactly. And that's, no one wants to think of it, but that's for me is part of the prep work is not just the communication, the accounts, all of these, but it's also having those, again, that income. No one wants to figure out how am I going to eat or pay for the mortgage or anything like that when we're just suffering a huge loss like that. So it's just, for me, it's having those things in place allow for people to just grieve and not worry about money.
Although the reverse of that is also true. So now I'm afraid that, I'm worth more dead than alive.
Well, okay.
I've got enough insurance that if something happens to me, my family's going to be taken care of. So I kind of sleep with one eye open.
This guy. We love you, honey.
So, Bobby, before we kind of get to the end here, anything else you wanted to mention? Anything we didn't ask you?
No, you guys did a great job. I just wanted to throw in that another thing that people can do is surround themselves with the right financial professionals.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you have a business or your business is the main income resource, you may want to know who the CPA or the accountants are. If you got investments, you may need to know who your financial advisor or your planner is, or your financial coach or your attorney, or all these folks. So it's important that you know who they are and be in contact with them. I was just a while back, I saw an article on about widows and financial advisors. Typically, the advisor works with the male in the family. And if that male is not there anymore, one of the first things they said that women do is fire the advisor, because they have not established a relationship with the advisor. So they go and find someone who fits their personality or who they can relate with. So it's important that you surround yourself with the right financial people in advance before something happens.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And maybe both of you go to those meetings.
There you go.
Rather than just one of you.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, cool. Yeah. Again, it's, people want to go to your website. It's clarkonmoney.com, or they can reach you, Bobby, at clarkonmoney.com. I did take a look. Like I said at the beginning, I do a little bit of prep work.
A little research here.
And you've got your free monthly money planner on the website. People can stick in their name and email address, and they get that free monthly money planner. So thank you, Bobby. We appreciate you being a guest on this week's show.
It's been fun, guys. I really enjoyed it. Nice to meet you, Shawn. George, I look forward to meeting you tomorrow again.
We'll see in our mastermind. There you go.
Nice.
Yeah, we got a mastermind going on. But it's been great, guys. And And thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. I do want to mention our second sponsor, Mark Purvis with LegacySpotlight.com. So one way, if you're curious about how can I tell my spouse about all this stuff, or I need to record some of this stuff in case something happens for my spouse, my kids, my future generations, whatever, LegacySpotlight.com. You can hire Mark. Mark will come out. You can record whatever it is you want to record, whatever messages, whatever documents, whatever information, whatever stories. He'll record those and help you preserve those stories and those pearls of wisdom for future generations. Again, LegacySpotlight.com. That'll get Mark Purvis out to your place to help you with that. Again, all the social medias. So the Curbelo Financial TikTok. If you do want to help us here support the show, you can always find us on our Patreon page. Any money that we make on Patreon gets invested back into the show. But I think we're kind of at the end.
I got to say it was definitely a tough conversation to have, but it's definitely I'm glad that we had it. And
necessary.
Glad that Bobby was on. Thank you, buddy.
Yeah. Thanks again, Bobby. So again, we'll wrap it up here. But the goal of every episode is that we hope you have more money at the end of the month rather than month at the end of the money. And we will talk to you in next week's episode of the Crushing Debt podcast.
If you have questions that you think would make a great topic for a future episode, please email Shawn or connect with us on social media. Shawn Yesner and Yesner Law, PL, are Florida licensed attorneys. The information contained in this week's episode is not a substitute for legal advice. Your situation may differ, especially if you are located somewhere other than the state of Florida. If you have questions, please contact our office or contact a local attorney. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast.